Welcome to the Supply Chain Dialogue Season 2, Episode 11. I am Daniel Helmig. Do you have a good handle on your greenhouse gas emissions in your supply chain? I mean Scope 3, the most important scope of them all. Why do I say this? Because between 70 to 90% of greenhouse gas emissions you create in your line of duty is located in your supply chain. Unless you are a financial institution, deal with fossil fuel importers, exporters, or producers, then your upstream Scope 3 is another interesting problem to have. If you're like many of practitioners and leaders in the supply chain or operations area, you struggle in getting companies that are your suppliers to provide you meaningful emission reporting and plans to get to net zero. And you have an even tougher time to use the data to draw actionable conclusions. Now, today, I have the privilege to have Christian Heinrich, or let me say it correctly, Prof Dr Christian Heinrich as my guest. Christian is co-founder of the company carbmee, and we will talk about this a lot today. He's as well, and I love this, Professor of Digital Transformation at the Quadriga Hochschule in Berlin. So he is teaching what he and his team is actually doing. He as well gives lectures at Julius Maximilian University of Würzburg, where he sits today for the interview in an empty lecture hall, and Università di Bologna. Beside this, I know that he loves Italy, not the least because his wife is from this beautiful country and spends as much time as possible there. And Christian knows how regional sourcing and climate can have an impact on products, since he as well, together with his wife, runs wine shops in Würzburg and Erlangen in Germany, which are called Wohlsein, which translates as well-being as well as cheers in English. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview, which I hope that you will enjoy as much as I did. Christian, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Really a pleasure.
We have quite a number of interesting questions that we can go through. So therefore, why don't we just get started about your journey as the co-founder of carbmee and how the company has evolved since 2021, which is massive if I look at what you guys have done in the meantime.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the chance for the intro. I think from a financial perspective and growth perspective, we can keep it very easy and short. We are growing 3x every year. And I see also from an outlook and forecast perspective, that's the same thing for next year. It was very challenging, to be honest, in the first 1 and 2 years, because no one understood the complexity of what we are doing, carbon emissions in supply chains. Right now, it changed massively. And I would say the first 3 years have been the hardest, but we saw already in the year number 3 a very strong, almost hockey stick trend, which is from a financial performance and a team performance very, very good.
Excellent. For the chief procurement officers that are listening to this, and I know there are a few, just let me tell you from my perspective, I had the chance to meet carbmee and their product after my corporate career. And I could kick myself in the behind because I would have loved to have had the pleasure to work with them beforehand. This is a great package, and don't take my word for it, just check it out. You will be amazed. Christian, what inspired you to start carbmee, and how has your vision for the company changed or expanded since its inception a couple of years ago?
That's a great question. So we started at the end with a so-called 80% challenge. And I'm quickly explaining what I mean with that. Every company is producing carbon emissions, and especially companies who are producing something hardware-oriented, may it be manufacturing, fast-moving consumer goods, industrials, or heavy manufacturing, oil, gas, etc. They usually have a very big amount of shares caused by the supply chain, purchased goods and services, etc. And this is what we call the 80% challenge. Yes, we have customers, they have 96% of all emissions caused in the supply chain. And right now, coming to your question, so my co-founder Robin worked from a sustainability perspective for a company called Siemens. I guess almost everybody knows the company. And they also have a very high amount in Scope 3 emissions. And then he asked me, Christian, you from your background working with BASF, co-founding procurement supply chain startups before, you have process knowledge and automation knowledge in supply chain no one else has, because you need to differentiate between the various industries. So at the end, it was almost a duty or an honor. You can right now choose by yourself that I start together with Robin carbmee, because he also said it's far more important to understand the processes and the business processes and then automate them instead of just doing a dashboard. Because with a dashboard, you will never reduce any carbon emissions. And also your children and grandchildren will be very grateful if you do that and if you offer the industry such a solution based on our knowledge. And this was at the end the carbmee start 3 years ago. And our vision is also exactly that. So get carbon under management, offer the software to companies, automotive companies, manufacturing companies, oil, gas companies, etc., that they get transparency first. And then based on the transactional transparency, they are able to start the reduction process without spending, I would say, tens of millions for manual consulting or Excel sheet work. I always compare it with the production planning area. It's always better to have a production planning system and not having only spreadsheets.
Absolutely. What you can measure, you can control, huh? The old saying, but still true to some extent. And I think it's as well great that many companies that I've seen in this field as well from your competitors, and I use always the Six Sigma approach, the DMAIC approach. They are good when it comes to D and M, so define and measure. But when it comes then to anything that is following in terms of analyzing, improvement, or even then control, forget it. It's not there. And this is scary like hell, I think. Since we are on scary already, so can you, for lay people, explain where we are concerning climate change and the level of greenhouse gas emissions?
Right now, everybody's talking about our environment and sustainability in Dubai these days. But this is every, let's say, 1 or 2 years happening in end of the year. Then we have some regulations and we have the real status quo. That I would say that some pioneers, decarbonization pioneers, already have understood that they need to change their product portfolio more into the direction of generating more eco-friendly, carbon neutral products in the future in order to have a new USP almost with the same old product. But there are also others, they start right now because they have some pressure from regulations, maybe the carbon border tax adjustment or the SEC announcement, or the private equity owners inform the board that they should reduce the carbon emissions in order to create more company value also in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's a massive difference from a level of maturity, also from the level of, let's say, sizes in the company. Overall, what I have considered is that the awareness about the terms and technology is way higher right now compared to 2 years back. So we are talking a lot about scope 3 these days. And to giving you an example, 2 years ago, I would say maybe 7 out of 10 CPOs had heard this term first time in their life 2 years ago. This year already, 2023, I would say 9 out of 10 could really explain what is scope 3, that they are responsible for scope 3.1, and not for scope 3.15 with franchising, for example. And that's brilliant. And this is also how you see they are right now on the level from getting more and more transparency, moving from spend-based high-level estimations into transactional, detailed primary data, secondary database, because they understand also I can only reduce if I have transparency. And this should be automated, because otherwise I'm always measuring, as you said, with the DMAIC cycle, and I will be never able to reduce anything. And that's already the target, which some of the companies have also put into the SVP incentives for the commissions.
Yeah. Now, you work not only alone, but you work as well, you collaborate. Can you explain a little bit of how you either work with co-opetition or in other ways with partners and stakeholders in the climate action space?
Yeah, that's such a rapid growing market, or also challenge, because also the regulations are changing very fast. And I have never seen such a fast governmental push, even not in digitization in the last 10 or 15 years. That CO2 equivalent, GHG, carbon emissions, they are already seen as a new currency. And even if we have thought that Bitcoins could be a new currency, which is globally established, I make a bet right now, and I would say that CO2 is even more established already right now than the Bitcoins are. just to make it this kind of comparison between digitization and sustainable transformation. So as a consequence, I think that this will be a really massive shift. And this is also why we work together with different stakeholders. So climate institutes, which are more science oriented, universities globally, they give us the knowledge and the input. What is the carbon price? How can you measure the carbon price? What's the difference in which country? Then also from political perspectives, so which laws and regulations are relevant in which country, in which region. Let's talk, for example, about CBAM, the carbon border tax adjustment. Everybody who is importing and exporting several categories need to pay some extra tax then soon, but they need to right now start already to do the reporting. And then another big group where we are cooperating are our partners from a more commercial perspective. On the one hand, it's consultant partners. They are implementing it. So this could be accounting consultancies, sustainability consultancies, but also supply chain and procurement experts like you. And in that area of the partnerings, we also cooperate with other software providers. Maybe, some supplier relationship management systems, some ERP systems, and then we integrate. So we do the calculations and we integrate it to their systems so that it's also easy to use for our companies and our clients.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because you actually really work the network approach. There are so many others who are trying to be the jack of all trades, and then they just bite up too much and they are not able to handle. You have defined very clearly where your value is, and you utilize other people to just pull them in, get this done. I love that. And since we are talking about people, in my last podcast, I had the pleasure as well to talk with someone about talent management in the age of AI and greenhouse gas emissions. You have some brilliant staff. Whenever I've had the pleasure to be together with them, I was just absolutely amazed about the competency, the talent, and as well the enthusiasm that your team have. How do you get such high performers into your company?
That's a great question and a great challenge. So first of all, I think you need to have a very startup-ish approach. And this is easy for us because we are per definition a startup. So we can offer different ways of working. So I would not call it workation because I really don't like the word because there's too much vacation in the workation. But you should be flexible from that perspective. We, for example, also give all our employees every Friday in August extra holiday for free. So this is one thing. And if we have very intense working phases, like we have seen that right now, this Q4, so we work, honestly speaking, because the demand was so heavy increasing, we just give them another 3 days vacation for free between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And this is something like extra value our colleagues and team members value to us. So that's one thing. And the other thing is definitely also not only talking about your core values and our main value, our North Star is get carbon under management and help the industry to decarbonize itself. So this is really a massive vision. And we have completely different team members. So some are sitting in Brazil, some are sitting in Portugal, some are sitting in Austria. So everything from everywhere. And I share this knowledge. And then we come together every 3 to 6 months in person. And we try really to improve that always. We also invest very early, even if we are a startup, in company trainings and in people education programs. So everybody has a people plan, and then we have some specialists announced. So from a startup perspective, this is very mature. And our HR and people and culture department doesn't have 10 team members, by the way. So that's definitely a lot, but we need to combine all these methodologies in order to really attract the best talent and to keep growing like that, though.
Sometimes you hear that from companies, but it seems it works in your company, which is really nice. And again, I mean, who you are able to get on board and to work with you is fantastic in terms of competence. Great. Switching focus, when I was a CPO and you would come into my office, normally at some point in time, I'd just ask the very simple question, which is, okay, how do you differentiate yourself from your competitors? What would you say?
That's not easy to answer because the market is changing that dynamically from external. Today, I would maybe answer, we have already a CBAM solution for reporting and reduction before CBAM has been announced. But this I would only tell to people who know what CBAM is.
Yeah.
Coming from an original thing. So at the end, we are the Scope 3 supply chain experts because we started from there regarding supplier carbon reduction. So we have complex automated process, which then is very simple because you can use it in order to measure, to track, and to reduce the supplier carbon emissions. Then we combine it with a product carbon footprint module, and we combine it with a carbon accounting carbon footprint. This is also what Gartner said. We are listed in 2 categories, so carbon accounting and management, and in scope 3 supply chain emissions as the only software provider, because we strongly believe that you need something like an ERP system for carbon management with the different modules. And that's basically it. Plus our industry expertise. So we are really working for hardware oriented companies with complex supply chains on a bill of material level.
Okay. When I, for the first time, saw what you guys are doing, I felt as well it's a one-stop shopping solution to get to net zero, which is different to what you normally see. They're all coming in there and trying to sell you an accounting solution, which is not really what you need, specifically when you work as a CPO and trying to as well reduce costs in a lot of other things in parallel and hurt the cats of all your internal customers. Oh, cool. One of the major attributes of your company is your software. It's called EIS. Would you mind explaining what it stands for, what it does, and how do you actually utilize it to beat your competition?
Sure. So EIS means Environmental Intelligence System, because even if we all love to talk from an easiness perspective about carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, it's a little bit more than that, and it's always becoming extended. So if we talk in 3 years, for example, about biodiversity, we will have an extra module for that. But today it's CO2 equivalent, which is also wastewater reduction, etc. And this is in general covered. To make it very simple, it's a carbon footprint automation tool, which at scale can automatically calculate product carbon footprints, supplier carbon footprints, and then at the end also the company carbon footprint. And coming from a, let's say, holistic one-stop shop solution view, it is a must for me as a, let's say, software architect, that this is one integrated solution, and that procurement from a category management perspective is using the drill down functionality in the same software environment like the accounting team later is reporting. Because as we all know, if you have 2 island solutions, you then have a high discrepancy in accuracy, and at the end, a lot of problems. And this is also big competition USP. The next one is, as I've said before, the industry expertise and the focus, because we are focusing exactly on bill of material oriented or receipt oriented industries with a lot of transparency in their supply chain. So we help them making it more transparent. For example, giving the procurement leads the chance to have a pre-calculated supplier carbon footprint without sending out an email, a questionnaire, or calling your suppliers. So from a negotiation perspective, we turn the whole power wheel to the other side. And this enables you to, first of all, get results, and then get correct results, and then get them fast. So accuracy, being fast, and doing the whole thing in a very simple, easy to use perspective is great.
My old automotive supply chain heart is beating faster. When you talk about that you can provide carbon estimating to some extent, and with that you can go into a negotiation, that reminds me very much of what we have done in the past with cost estimating. And we trained our buyers in a way that you can really understand what are the cost structure of these parts. And just again, for my colleagues in the CPO profession that are right now being bombarded with cost increases from suppliers, and in case that you are in an industry where cost estimating was not there, if we forget for a moment aluminum and steel, energy related cost aspects of a part that you buy, whether it's in plastic injection molding or whatever it is, you talk about 2 to 3% in terms of cost. So if anyone comes to you and suddenly telling you, oh, that is so costly if we change, this is what the Americans would call BS. So they might come to you because they're the only supplier, and hence then you pay just for the point that they are the first entrant into the market. That might happen. But it is worthwhile to look at carbon costing and carbon calculation, as carbmee is doing, and as well understanding a little bit the cost structure of this as well. Okay, sorry, that was a quick excursion. I could not hold back. Yeah, so
I can also comment on that, because
yes, please.
We are doing the whole, let's say, carbon exercise, not because we like to save the planet for no reason. We also know the holistic view and the macro perspective, But we also know that every company needs to earn money, needs to be profitable and to remain it. That's what I mentioned, to make the bridge from an investor's perspective. And they already plan that high carbon companies have a lower company valuation because the margin will be eaten up due to this carbon problem in the next years.
Yes.
So coming to the procurement view, and we exactly came from the cost breakdown perspective. We call it emission breakdown, by the way, and we also call it hotspot analysis, like we know our ABC XYZ classification. So it does not make sense to focus too much in the negotiations with so-called C material suppliers. In our case, it would be deprioritized hotspot, non-hotspot suppliers. Focus on the hotspots first, make emission breakdowns, make also according to science-based target initiative. Some companies are committed, make reduction plans. And by the way, those reduction plans per supplier can be also managed automatically in the software. So that's another thing. You do not need to have 20 spreadsheets in parallel, and then you cannot get them together.
Exactly. So let's be a little bit more specific. Can you share some of the success stories or case studies that you had where carbmee could help to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions already?
Yeah. So I can now talk about 15 minutes, but I try to focus on one or two. So we had one client, almost $1 billion revenue. They said, okay, we need to get transparency into our carbon emissions and not doing it with manual calculations and asking in-house and externally. They then just started with having a company carbon footprint, which is connected because the company carbon footprint said, okay, 87% of the whole story is in procurement. It's in so-called scope 3.1. So then we need to have a deep dive look into scope 3.1. And then their first question was, how do I get the information about the material which I'm purchasing, and how can I then put a CO2 figure behind that? Yeah, we call it in our tech language, we match the material, the product workflows, the logistic workflows, and the purchasing workflows with the emission factors. So that's at the end what our engine is doing. And that at scale. Imagine you have 10,000 suppliers, like in that case, and you have then maybe, I don't know, 55,000 purchasing transactions per year out of those 10,000 suppliers. You would have to calculate the 55,000 supplier carbon footprints. You can do that also automated, but it takes you 1.5 years at the end.
Yeah.
And then you still have the inaccuracy. This is something we did automatically. And then it's also easy to start the cooperation and the collaboration with the suppliers who are causing the highest amount of the emissions. That's the so-called emission emitter, the hotspots. And then they start the reduction process because you get an easy recommendation. If this supplier would use green energy for the production process, then you have your carbon emission savings, let's say about 8% increased. So I call it bring the low-hanging fruits home, just due to transparency. So in the first wave, you do not need to change a lot. You just need to motivate and activate the suppliers that they show you the maybe already carbon reduced efforts they have done. But as they not show it to you, you cannot bring them home. So the first 5 to 10% are doable just because of that. And then starting the dialogue with the supply chain sustainability days or something like that, then you give recommendations. So that's then the different waves. So this is the supplier engagement example. Then for another company, it was more a forward sourcing cooperation with car manufacturer, OEM. They said, I need already to think about which kind of material am I purchasing, but not from a low cost country perspective, from a low carbon perspective. And if you know that in advance, that one steel would be enough, the type, then you can then already say, okay, let's select this one, even if it's maybe 0.3% more expensive, but taxes are kicking in and the higher reduction effect. This is way better, especially for the next 6 years of the whole production.
It's fantastic. I mean, this is exactly what you need when you're sitting in a procurement organization. You are not the expert. You just need someone who can help you to figure out, okay, what are the, as you said, the low-hanging fruits, and where can you already from the beginning plan for 3 or 4 years in advance, specifically in automotive, where some of these cars or the programs come on board in 4 or 5 years, right? This is good. Coming to your webpage, you basically certified for actually every major greenhouse gas emission standard. Right now you promote this CSRD. How do you feel about the number of different standards? Do you think the range of standards actually help tackle greenhouse gas emission reduction overall?
let's say it's good that everybody is obviously doing something around that. But it's for us as a company a very high invest to be always compliant to all standards, to being TÜV and ISO certified, being compliant to all accounting rules. Also coming, I think that in the future we will see a kind of a consolidation led by the IFRS, because then it's a big accounting view, and we try to be compliant to everything which is coming up, which is new, which has a global reach, especially in our industries. We did not even talk about ISO certifications regarding IT security, etc. So that's a totally different thing, but it's also a certification. In general, I think it's still the GHG and then the PACT and then the IFRS who are leading it. And then there are some others. Also CDP conformity is important, but there are different layers. And that's why we have a team of climate strategists. So when we have this network where we are exchanging tool, that we always are up to speed on the latest status, and we implement that what is necessary for our clients in the software. That's the advantage of a software, because it's a standard application software. This is then for everybody relevant at the end. And it's like CSRD, or like we had it in the last 4 months, CBAM. This came in the summer break, and then everybody should in January report already the Q4 figures for CBAM. And I would say almost no one knew what really CBAM is in September, and they should already start collecting the numbers from September on. So that's really was very fast now.
Okay. You know my opinion on this, which is the less standards are good standards. If you look at analysis that has been done via the International Monetary Fund, 40 biggest countries in terms of greenhouse gas emissions have over 200 different standards. The automotive industry has too many different ones. And there are studies which looked at the rollout of other standards. And one of the main reasons why it actually worked was that the number of standards was reduced significantly. And I think that we are right now wasting precious time by dealing with too many. I understand everyone, as you said at the beginning, everyone would like to do the right thing. At some point in time, they have to start singing Kumbaya together, I think. Let's see.
I mean, I really look, but I think it will need some years. But I think the IFRS is definitely giving a big push from accounting, and then also the Big Four have to implement it in the companies. But I'm 100% with you. So as we know it from our mobile charging cables right now, I think it took some days.
Happy.
Right.
That's true. When you look now back in the history of carbmee, any key lessons that you have learned over the journey with carbmee, and how do they influence your approach of tackling greenhouse gas emissions and recommendations you would give?
So from a company perspective in the GHG environment, it's really focus, because you mentioned it, there are different standards, there are different industries, whatever. It's simply impossible to offer with one solution, a solution which works for every industry. So we focus from the beginning on hardware-oriented manufacturing, automotive, etc. companies. And then we are also the experts there and can really deliver value to our clients. And this is at the end also important from the GHG emissions perspective. If they have a huge problem in scope 3, then we are the best solution. And this works if you really focus on that and deliver the best solution in this area. So just making it very quick, it's really being focused in what you do and not being exactly the holistic ESG solution for everything, which does not exist. I mean, if you think a dashboard is already a solution, okay, that's the definition. But there must be something behind it which collects the data. And for me, a full solution collects the data and then shows the data. And from that perspective, it makes really sense to focus.
Yeah. Now, as a CPO or as a department head in any kind of procurement department, you look for something where each buyer can take the data and run with it and know what he or she needs to do, and not some fancy dashboard for senior management that doesn't help you to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in your scope 3. Now, as a last question, Christian, thank you very much. But before we end this podcast, do you have any advice for supply chain operations heads today that are listening in about how to lead the greenhouse gas emission net zero transformation overall?
Yeah, and this advice is not my advice. So I usually collect all the feedbacks. I don't count them anymore, but I was talking in the last 3 years with more than 500 procurement leaders globally from various hardware-oriented heavy companies, industries. They have to reduce, they know it, and we should not even talk about that first. We should first of all talk about your data strategy. So define where do you get your data from in order to measure, improve, and reduce that topic. And after having understood that, make a decision for an automation tool and then build up your sustainable procurement teams. Or you just select one person who is in the beginning, the sustainable procurement expert. This person should then also select the software which helps you in the reduction process, which you can then implement in the company. And then you can also set the targets for the reduction per category, per country, per production site, whatever. So first, leverage the data strategy from an automation perspective, and then make your decarbonization pillars and reduction projects, which you then bring home over the next year. Because very often we have time until 2027 or 2030, and we should use the time, but then you should use 2023 and latest 2024 in order to select your setup from the software and org structure.
Okay. Very good. So I hope that a lot of guys that can actually make a difference have listened in and utilize this. And if you are not very clear, just reach out to Christian and his team. I will put in the show notes the linkages to the website and to some of the contacts. As I mentioned, you will be amazed about the people you will talk to. These are real experts that have a good understanding and are well linked. So that makes perfect sense as well for every person that would like to do greenhouse gas emissions in procurement. Christian, thank you so very much.
It was a pleasure, Daniel, and it was really enjoyed talking and explaining a little bit, having the dialogue with you, because I know you right now also quite a while, and as you are an expert in standards, carbon emissions, procurement, I do not need to mention. It's even better if someone like you understands also my world, and then we can play the game together. That's great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Supply Chain Dialogues. If you did, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, or any other major podcast platforms. There is more cool stuff coming. And if you are already a subscriber, tell a friend or colleague or any decision maker in your company or local, regional, or country government, especially when we talk about greenhouse gas emission reduction and how to get this done. We gained this year significant traction because of many of you doing this, so thank you very much. If you'd like to reach out to the brilliant team of carbmee to potentially help you how to achieve net zero emissions in your company in the next years, check out their website linked in the show notes, which is carbmee.com, or directly go onto their website under contact to get a decarbonization expert engaged with you. With that, be safe, be bold, and happy holidays to those who have some over the next weeks.